January 12th, 2026, Buddhadhamma, Part 2, 11.10, Chapter 11.10, Practical Application, Part 2, page 1191 to 1205. We got D, E, F, and G. D, developing sense desires from completion to cooperation. E, joy leads to spiritual growth. F, a cultivated mind is easily content. G, happiness of giving leads to peace in society. Chapter 11.10, Practical Application, Part 2. January 12th, 2026. D, developing sense desire from completion to cooperation. In regards to sense desire, which is tied up with selfishness, when people develop the four divine abidings, metta, karuna, upekkha, and mudita, the four divine abidings, their mind begins to radiate with these qualities outwards. Their selflessness is reduced. They will not be exclusively caught up in trying to obtain things in order to seek personal gratification. Now they also begin to consider the happiness of others. This wholesome desire, chanta, along with happiness of seeing others, possesses attractive physical features like good health, contentment, acts as a counterbalance to selfish impulses. The wish for others to be happy is a form of loving kindness, metta, a form of friendship, metta. The wish for them to be free from dukkha is compassion, karuna. Sharing in happiness with others succeeds and appreciative joy is mudita. And when others have the potential to make mistakes, one wishes for them to abide in righteousness and correctness. Thus, one adopts equanimity, upekkha. In order to safeguard and maintain the truth in the Dhamma, when people are endowed with these four qualities, their minds are radiant and expansive, deserving of the title Brahma, meaning divine, elevated, sublime. Their happiness will increase, and importantly, the happiness will be shared by others. If one simply remains at the level of sense desire, one's happiness will surely be competitive. If I win something, you must lose, or you must do without. If you see something, I go without. If I derive happiness, he derives none, or else he suffers, and vice versa. In some, one vies for happiness. One does not share one's happiness. This is one critical disadvantage of sense and material pleasure. The reason the world is so troubled, so full of oppression, brutality, and killing is because of this scramble for sense pleasure. As a response, people need to develop themselves in order to reduce the dangers of sense pleasures and increase in the blessing of higher forms of happiness. The happiness of the four divine abidings is shared. When others experience happiness, we too are happy. A mother is not happy until her child are happy. Once they are happy, she too is happy. This is a shared collective happiness. Here one has developed happiness to another level, to social happiness. One has guaranteed from a competitive form of happiness where everyone simply fends for themselves and vies for limited objects to be shared collective happiness. This also is critical stage for ethics, helping to promote true peace in the world. Gautama Buddha gave great emphasis to developing social happiness, especially in the context of the four divine abidings. The four divine abidings help in developing the quality of one's mind. For the real success, one needs to also practice the four bases of social solidarity, Sanghavatu, and the six virtues conducive to communal life, Buddhadhamma. Because the management of these sense desire is linked to the development of social happiness, it needs to be included in this discussion. Gautama Buddha, encouraged people to manage sense desire in correct, righteous fashions, free from harm. At the very least, one should minimize the dangers of sense desire and use it in the positive, beneficial ways. Gautama Buddha acknowledged the sense pleasures is a form of happiness. He went on to say that it has advantages, asata. Remember, asata is the advantages is the positive form. Atitnava is the negative form. But asata has advantages and disadvantages, atitnava. And there exists a way out, nitsarana, a way out or a solution to the sense pleasure. A way to escape from its disadvantages, a way to escape from atitnava. Indeed, the escape from sense desire is precisely the development of higher forms of happiness, sukha, beginning with the development of social happiness. There is no problem here if one still delights in sense pleasure, along with the restraints of keeping the five precepts. The cultivation of social happiness prevents people from getting overly caught up with themselves and from competing with others. Instead, there will be more mutual assistance and cooperation. At the same time, people will experience another form of happiness, which is more stable and enduring than sense pleasure. It's good to note that it is said that you don't have to become a monk to become a sotapanna. Just by simply keeping the five precepts, you could reach the stream entry. That's a good thing to think about. Many people are unaware that the habitual pursuit of personal gratification eventually leads to being more susceptible to suffering. This susceptibility to suffering fosters an inclination to suffer. Let us return to the subject of shared happiness. To begin with, when one sees others happy and well, one shares in their happiness, a feeling referred to as metta, loving kindness. Next, one wishes for others to be free from suffering and cured from illness, and one shares in their happiness when they escape from these problems. This is referred to as karuna, compassion. Compassion has another additional benefit. Imagine that one falls ill, sick, and experiencing discomfort. If one is preoccupied with one's own problems, thinking, why must this happen to me? Why me? And so forth, the suffering will be even more intense. Some may think, let others suffer from this disease instead. Why does this have to happen to me? Why not you? These kinds of thoughts only increase the suffering. If one is endowed with compassion, when facing illness, one will not brood over one's own problems. Rather, one will consider other human beings, thinking, here I am faced with this illness and experiencing great discomfort. Yet there are other people in the world who are poor and destitute, who have no friends or relatives, who have no money to buy medicine or nurses to care for them. We must be like for them. Yes, it is true that I am very ill, but I have friends and relatives to care for me and doctors who are attending on me. At least I have adequate food and shelter. Think of the suffering for those people who are ill and who lack all these things. By thinking in this way, the severity of one's own illness is reduced. The fact that one is sick will lessen in importance. It may even happen that one does not feel the discomfort any longer. When one is able to further develop compassionate thoughts, one illness becomes a reminder. One thinks, Were I not to have this illness, I probably would have forgotten to take into consideration those other peoples who suffer from illness. Now that I am reminded, how can I offer them assistance? This is how illness reminds us to help those numerous peoples who are destitute and are oppressed, who have no friends or relatives or people to care for them. They need our help to be freed from affliction. Illness is an impetus for compassion, or impetus from compassion. Besides spurring us to look for ways to help others, our own suffering will be abated and sometimes even despaired or disappear. One's own illness will lose its significance. The divine abidings are vital. They do not simply remain as a passive emotion in the mind, but actively bear fruit in far-reaching ways. The Buddha stressed their cultivation and the source of fruit of spiritual development in a wholesome desire, chanta. In this chapter, the focus has been on wholesome desire in the social context. As one way of describing the importance of this spiritual factor, besides teaching people how to manage sense desire, which has the potential to create intense suffering, one also needs to encourage people to develop social happiness by having them cultivate wholesome desire in respect to others through kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. In this way, people will share their happiness with others. They will be impelled to offer mutual assistance. At the very least, it will help to offset and reduce the harmful effects of sense desire. E. Joy leads to spiritual growth. The third kind of happiness referred to above is the happiness of spiritual development. This kind of happiness is generated from within an individual. It arises simultaneously with the overall development of one's life. It accompanies progress in the Dhamma practice. The development of body, moral conduct, the mind, and wisdom may be referred to spiritual cultivation or Dhamma practice. When this development progresses, one experiences spiritual happiness. The Buddha gave a teaching on the 5 factors of happiness and spiritual development, which are collectively given as usual name of concentration of the Dhamma, Dhamma Samadhi. Although this group is not exclusively referred to as sukha, happiness, happiness is one of the factors. Moreover, all the other factors are attributes of sukha, happiness, and are connected with sukha, connected with happiness. Since our present discussion is on sukha, on happiness, we can thus refer to the group of the factors of happiness. The 5 factors contained in this group refer to specific mind states. Sukha bhava. We call it the happy mind state, sukha bhava. The Buddha repeatedly stressed that someone whose Dhamma practice bears fruit will grow in these 5 qualities. Conversely, if someone practices the Dhamma, yet these 5 qualities fail to arise, there will be no hope of true success. One example the Buddha gave is of someone who listens to the Dhamma and then investigates it, puts it into application. If he or she practices correctly, panya, wisdom, deepens and the 5 mind states arise. Similar to social happiness, these 5 factors of happiness and spiritual development are based on wholesome enthusiasm, chanta. They unfold in an ordered sequence, but they are not expressed outwardly. They exist as direct and intermediate attributes of the mind. These factors are as follows: joy, pamoja. We have joy before we have anything. Cheerfulness, gladness. This is the fundamental attribute of the mind, which people would sustain at all times. In the Dhammapada, it states in verse 381, full of joy, confident in the Buddha's teaching, dispensation, a bhikkhu, a monk, will attain the peaceful state, the stilling of formation, the bliss supreme. Now in Pali, it's It goes, Pamoja pahulo binku pasano buta sasane atikache patam satam sakarupa samam sukham. Dhammapada, verse 381. Another verse from the Dhammapada describes a monk who has practiced well and correctly and ends from Dhammapada, verse 376. Tato pamoja pahulo dukha santam karisati. Translated as, full of joy, he will make an end of suffering. Joy is the vital, innate quality indicating that one is progressing in a spiritual practice and has the potential to develop further. When one is full of joy, it is possible to realize nibbida, or one is close to nibbida. The second is piti, delight, bliss, rapture. With joy, there is delight. The third is pasati, tranquility, serenity, calm, physical and mental relaxation. This factor acts as the link between the body and the mind. If the body is tense, the mind is tense. If the mind is stressed, the body is stressed. With delight, there is tranquility, relaxation. Fourth is sukha, happiness, sense of material refreshment, ease, absence of affliction and stress. With the arising of tranquility, there is happiness. And fifth is samadhi, concentration, one-pointedness of mind, steadiness of mind, absence of mental disturbance, attention rests on a chosen object as desired. With the arisen of happiness, there is the potential for concentration. Concentration acts as the link to panya, to wisdom. So samadhi acts as the link to wisdom. It prepares the mind for the effective application of wisdom. And when wisdom is developed, every other aspect of spiritual development is optimized and progresses smoothly. The presence of these 5 factors is critical to spiritual development of human beings. When people are endowed with these factors, their education and work proceeds effectively. Their entire Dhamma practice is steady and reliable. If people practice incorrectly, the opposite qualities like trouble and stress arise. There is then an absence of joy, delight, tranquility, and happiness, and the mind remains scattered. Then one experiences inner disturbance and obstruction. The mind is imbalanced and ill at ease. The result is lack of progress or success. If one possesses the 5 complemented factors, they will automatically be integrated with spiritual qualities connected to society, in particular to the 4 divine abidings. When one generates loving kindness towards others, one generates in self-development. The performing of benevolent deeds is simultaneously a way to practice the Dhamma within oneself. By acting kindly, one develops spiritually. At the same time, by radiating a sense of loving kindness, joy arises within. Joy is then followed by other qualities, for example, like the quality of delight. Similarly, when one compassionately abides someone who is suffering, once that person is healthy and at ease, one experiences delight, which is then followed by other qualities, including happiness. If one is continually cheerful, relaxed, and calm, wherever one goes, one enhances one's social environment. Whomever one meets and speaks feels at ease and shares in one's happiness. One thus induces happiness and engenders spiritual qualities in others also. One supports others' spiritual development. When one walks on the correct path, these positive factors arise in a natural sequence. They are all interconnected. They are all aspects of happiness. A simple method of Dhamma practice is thus to maintain one's mind in the state of cheerfulness. Ideally, one combines this with loving kindness, Although it may not be one's intention, one's complexion will appear pleasing and attractive to others. One will have many cooperative and helpful friends. One will live with others in peace. One's community will prosper. One will work to reach success. Let us here compare the three kinds of happiness: sense pleasure, social happiness, and happiness of spiritual development. Sense pleasure is derived from external material things obtained for one's own personal benefits. Each separate individual's desire or covets these things, and thus sense desire breeds competition and conflict. It therefore requires caution and restraint. The purpose of the five precepts is to regulate sense desire, to manage the pursuit of consumption of material things, and to prevent the creating an excessive amount of trouble and oppression for each other. Let me say that again. The purpose of the five precepts is to regulate sense desire, to manage the pursuit and consumption of material things, and to prevent people from creating excessive amount of trouble and oppression for each other. That's the five precepts. However much people consume or contest material things, one can wish that it does not reach the extent that the world becomes engulfed in flames. The five precepts exist as a reminder that the sense desire requires supervision and restraint. Latana Sinha. Social happiness is generated by providing happiness to others, to society. It stems from a heart of loving kindness and compassion, the desire to see others at ease, and is thus shared mutual happiness. The five happiness factors for spiritual development, beginning with joy, arises from within a person and have no negative effect on others. They may arise by doing good to others. They are the sharing point of spreading goodness outwards. So although it is an internal, personal happiness, it brings about a connection with others. It fosters virtue and mutual assistance. The latter two kinds of happiness cause no harm. Rather, they are supportive to both individual and to society. They help people to mitigate the harm from pursuing sense pleasure, and they introduce people to a way of enjoying sense pleasure, promoting mutual well-being. Moreover, they bring a refinement to people's lives and provides people with a way out, leading to higher levels of spiritual development. These two kinds of happiness should thus be given great emphasis. F. A cultivated mind is easily content. As mentioned earlier, sense pleasure is the most important matter for ordinary people and human beings. But because it involves vying with other people, one must manage it well and practice restraint. The five precepts were established in order to ensure that the pursuit of sense pleasure and consumption of the desirable objects remain with proper boundaries. However much one seeks pleasure and competes with others, don't let it be a cause for severe trouble to the extent that the world enters an era of oppression. When human beings are established in the five precepts, samatha, sinha, society is relatively stable. But this is no guarantee that people will be very happy. To improve the life of individual and society, people must develop themselves further. This is the purpose of the eighth precept. After one sought pleasure by relying on external material things for 7 or 8 days, one set aside 1 day in order to live more simply and to reduce one's dependencies on these things. The time one normally uses to gratify one's own desire, one uses other objectives by keeping the 8 precepts on the observant days of the uposatas. which falls on either the 8th or the 15th of the waxing moon, or the 8th and the 14th or 15th of the waning moon. So this is about 4 times a month, give or so. The 5 precept focuses on non-harming of other people. In the 8 precepts, the 3rd precept is changed to abstaining from sexual activity, and 3 additional precepts are added. Both of the variations of the 3rd precepts and the additional 3 precepts are matters concerning to the individual. They do not directly pertain to other people. The 3 additional precepts are to refrain from eating at an improper time, that is, after midday. On this day, one needs not pander to the tongue. The 7th precept, to refrain from singing, dancing, music, and various forms of entertainment that's pleasing to the ear and the eye. The 8th is to abstain from indulging in pleasures of tactile sensation derived from lying on soft and luxurious mattresses. 1 day each week is reserved for self-training. It is an easy method for developing happiness independent of external things. Although the Buddha acknowledged that seeking pleasure from material things is a personal matter, he said that if people are not careful, their happiness will become dependent on these things. Eventually, no amount of these things will suffice to provide them with happiness. They will keep trying to acquire more until they end up oppressing others. To maintain one's independence, and one thus need to train oneself. One may have pampered oneself with good food and delicious favors for 7 days. On the 8th day, one practices applying the 6th precept in order to see whether one can still be happy without following the desire of the palate. Instead of delicious tastes, one now emphasizes physical health and quality of life rather than following the desires of the palate. One eats just enough food to sustain the body. The same goes for the eyes and the ears. For 7 days, one entertains oneself by way of sights and sounds. On the 8th day, one applies the 7th precept and learns to live without these amusements. One uses one's time instead for other purposes. For instance, by practicing meditation, assisting other people, or benefit society. One may normally sleep on a thick and comfortable mattress. On the 8th day, one experiences by sleeping on a thin mat, or to see if one can be happy without relying on these comforts. By keeping these precepts, these training rules, people are more vigilant and avoid an over-dependence on and indulge in material things. Such a training in virtuous conduct makes people easily happy, not prone to suffering, and mentally strong. It is conducive to further development of happiness. It's the link to mental development and wisdom development. One way to wish to verify or determine that which extent one's happiness is independent of material things. To do this, consider the following kinds of people. Many people abandon themselves in the pursuit of sense pleasure. They must eat delicious food, entertain themselves with various amusement, television, sleep in luxurious beds. They are continually in the search of more of these things. The more exceptional things, eventually their happiness becomes dependent on these things, which becomes indispensable. They are not able to live contentedly by themselves, because the only channel for accessing happiness is by way of these material things. Some people's happiness is completely tied up with these gratifying sense objects. If they have to do without, they become agitated, thinking, I must have these things, otherwise I will die. In this case, they have utterly lost their independence. Those people who train themselves by way of the 8 precepts however, are able to live simply and find it easier to access happiness. They gradually become more self-reliant, flexible, and thus maintain their independence. In regard to gratifying sense objects, they say, I will take them or leave them. If I have them, I am comfortable. But if I live without them, even if I must lie on the mat or on the wooden floor, I can sleep. Moreover, they are less likely to suffer chronic back pain. Some people with chronic back pain are ordered by their doctors to sleep on the floor. One may gain a new level of proficiency. One will recognize that these fancies and extravagant things are unnecessary. In reference to these things, one may say, I can take them or leave them. Or even say, if I have them, it is okay, but it's fine not to have them because I have more freedom and independence. Already an initial training in these matters will bring about greater independence, enabling us to use our time more beneficially and to find it easier to experience happiness. We'll be able to derive an adequate and ample value of these sense objects. We won't be driven to increase the quality of degree of these things, while our level of happiness remains the same. While dwelling alone, one is able to experience happiness. If one encounters pleasurable sense object, one engages with them with wise discernment. They may supplement one's already existing happiness. Simply be aware of these things. Do not become essential for one's happiness. Otherwise, one will lose one's independence. In reference to the observance days, the Uposatha days, the Buddha encouraged people to use the time they would normally by seeking pleasurable sense experiences to engage in beneficial activities. Anawaja Kama. When one is not devoted to ministering to one's own personal pleasures, one is left with a lot of free time. On the observance days, one can use this spare time for wholesome purposes, say by seeking knowledge, reading the Dhamma, teaching children, meditating, helping orphans, or visiting the elderly. This is another stage of spiritual practice. When you have the opportunity, try and keep the Uposatha precepts training rules once every 8 days. They're not that difficult. Their benefits are great. They help maintain one's independence, enable one to live happily with few material possessions, are conducive to meditation and good health, enhance the quality of one's life, and provide one with extra time to engage in wholesome activities. G. Happiness of giving leads to peace in society. As mentioned earlier, Gautama Buddha gave great emphasis to social happiness. The focus so far has been on internal spiritual qualities by demonstrating how people's wholesome mind states are connected and have an effect on social happiness. The discussion has shown how people's happiness has many aspects, one of which happiness on a social level. To complete this discussion, we need also look at those principles pertaining to a more active engagement in society. We can begin by asking the questions: when someone feels kindness and wishes to make others happy, or feels compassion and wishes for others to be free from suffering, what is the most fundamental expression of these wholesome mind states? This is connected to a related question. What quality did the Buddha most often speak about in relation to householders? The answer is giving, generosity, dana. Buddhism begins with generosity, charity, dana. The Buddha presented a threefold practice for lay people called the 3 bases of virtuous action, punya, kiriya, vatu. They are sometimes referred as the 10 bases of meritorious actions, which is paired with the threefold training. Titso Sika. Monatistic speaking, the threefold training is the practice for monks and nuns, while the 3 bases of virtuous actions are for the lay people is generosity, dana, moral conduct, sila, and spiritual cultivation, bhavana, comprises of practice for all the laity. The first factor of virtuous actions is dana, generosity. In all the important groups taught by Gautama Buddha, spiritual qualities pertain to general public. Generosity, charity, is always the first factor. What does this term, dana, charity, giving, imply? It implies that, generally speaking, for the average person, the pursuit, possession, and division of consumption of material things are the most predominant activity, the main issues in people's lives. Of these activities dealing with material things, they merge as the activity of consumption. What is the basic line of thinking of basic mental preoccupation for most people? Due to the pressure of wanting to survive, people struggle to obtain things for themselves. This repeated thought patterns of trying to get things, to obtain things, eventually becomes habitual. It becomes an underlying tendency of the mind. Yet the pursuit, acquisition, and accumulation of things is restlessness. People generally do not know what is enough. Moreover, material things are limited in number, giving rise to completion and oppression, which escalates until the whole world is in conflict. The solution to this problem begins with giving, with charity and generosity. At the very least, generosity should be used as it offsets acquisitive tendencies. But if possible, one should embed this quality as a habit, as a natural disposition of the mind. If one only thinks about acquiring things, one will end up exploiting others. One will experience inner turmoil. To balance the act of acquisition is thus essential, also practice of charity, generosity. Sharing with others is thus paired with the pursuit, acquisition, and consumption for things for one's own personal benefit. It is considered the fundamental spiritual quality for lay people and for the well-being of human society. Generosity or charity acts as the foundation for developing higher spiritual qualities. The three bases of materialist action, punya, kirya, vatu, provide a broad outline of such development as generosity, moral conduct, and cultivation of the mind. When the Buddha taught lay people whose knowledge of the Dhamma was still at the beginning level, he would generally lay a gradual foundation by teaching what is referred to as the fivefold progressive instruction, Anupupakata. This teaching begins with generosity, dana, which is then followed by the talk of morality, sila kata, talk on heavenly pleasure, saga kata, the disadvantages of sense pleasures, kama atinawa, and the benefits of renunciation, nikama nisarana. Generosity is a part of the four principles of service, the virtues of making social integration, of generosity and charity, kindly speech, acts of service, and even the equal treatment of others. Generosity is the first factor in the 10 royal virtues. Dasa racha dhamma, virtues of the rulers. So we have dana, generosity, sila, moral conduct, self-sacrifice, paricha, integrity, ajawa, gentleness, madawa, self-control, tapa, non-anger, akota, non-violence, avihimsa, patience, kanti, conformality to righteousness, avirotana. Generosity is even the first factor in the 10 perfections. Parami, the virtues perfected by bodhisattvas or bodhisattvas. Generosity, moral conduct, and renunciation, wisdom, effort, patience, and honesty, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Generosity is the first factor in the several other groups of paramis, spiritual qualities. Its importance is obvious, even if one's striving and close to death. It is generosity that may save one's life. Generosity helps to alleviate suffering and generates happiness in societies that are competitive or oppressive due to the pursuit of personal pleasures. Besides its own inherent benefits, generosity also supporting factor of other qualities, including moral conduct. The sharing of material things makes it easier for people to maintain virtuous conduct. On a basic level, when people receive things from others, they are less likely to try to seize them through unlawful means. People having varying degrees of moral self-steadfastness, some people will not steal from others if they are not truly in need. But if they are destitute, they may revert to stealing as a way to survive. Generosity, say in the form of charity, can help in this situation. Of course, there are some people who have a very weak immunity to immoral behavior and will try to seize things from others whenever they feel a slight need. In such case, one may need to come up with other ways to address these problems. In any case, when the mutual sharing and caring, the incidents involving theft and violation of others' property would diminish. Generosity thus helps to protect the moral standards in society. Generosity is also the support for the cultivation of the mind. Even those practitioners who develop tranquility is insight meditation, samatha vipassana, prize the value of generosity. The Buddha Gautama stated how, in the context of tranquility and insight meditation, generosity is both the adornment of the mind, sita lakara, an embellishment of the mind, sita parikara. The practice of generosity and self-sacrifice helps to enhance and beautify the mind. It makes the mind receptive, obliging, and intent on goodness. It fortifies the mind, integrates wholesome intentions, prepares the mind for relinquishment. It makes the mind clear, spacious, relaxed, and bright. It is conducive to samadhi, concentration, to mental purification, sita visuddhi, and to the higher spiritual states. The delight and happiness of generosity alone is greatly beneficial to one's meditation, bhavana, to the development of tranquility, samatha, and to insight, vipassana. For this reason, people who have reached a level of awakening are still dedicated on the act of giving and sharing. The term dana encompasses a wide range of meanings, including generosity, charity, liberality, open-handedness, and hospitality. As mentioned earlier, it is the basis for happiness, harmonious society. Generosity has a key significance in Buddhism, both in Buddhist teaching and Buddhist history. Here, the Buddhist country of Thailand, one can observe that Thai people give easily, relinquish things easily, and are charitable by nature. Giving needs to be done correctly and carefully, however, it needs to be accompanied by wise reflection, yo niso manasikara, by taking precautions against harmful side effects. Moreover, it needs to be integrated with other aspects of spiritual practice. One shouldn't think, I have reached this state of meditation. I no longer need to participate in giving. This is incorrect. Generosity supports meditation. As mentioned above, it acts as an adornment for the mind, enabling one's tranquility, insight, meditation to bear fruit. That's the end of part 2